here at the top of Signal Hill in Signal Hill, California, and the vista you see beyond me is Long Beach, California. And as this statue indicates, Signal Hill used to be a very big producer of oil. It still is, but this entire hill used to be covered with oil derricks. And this green fence, if you drop down, oil derricks used to cover all that. I will find a historic photo to show in the video to show it really was all covered with oil derricks. The Wilmington oil field was discovered in 1932, and it ended up making a huge financial contribution to the city of Long Beach, and also a long-lasting financial contribution to individual Long Beach homeowners. And that's the part I want to focus on in this short vid. So in 1911, the state of California granted the city of Long Beach the tidelands and the submerged lands 3 miles offshore. That gave Long Beach the rights it needed to develop the harbor and the port of Long Beach. It also gave Long Beach the rights it needed to profit from any oil drilling off the coast. So the Wilmington oil field is discovered in 1932, and that drilling begins, and there's a big boom. When it's made clear how much oil is in the Wilmington oil field, as oil production ramped up, the city negotiated leases with the oil companies, and these leases typically included royalty payments to the city for the land it owned, but also negotiated the rate of royalty payments to, catch this, individual homeowners who had mineral rights. Mineral rights are rights for what sits underneath your property in the earth. And those rights are typically passed down or sold with the home that sits above the earth. So just in 1994, only in 1994, did 3 big oil companies say that they were going to stop paying oil royalties to 13,000, or was it 37,000? I'll have to look. 13,000 rights holders here in Long Beach. But that was in 1994. Oil production from the Wilmington oil field has slowly declined over time because the oil has been sucked out of the earth, and oil is a finite resource. God is not making any more dinosaurs. So back then, in 1932, it was an oil boom, and a lot more residents were getting oil royalties from their mineral rights. But you know who was not getting oil royalties from their mineral rights? African Americans. Now, why is that? Because they were not allowed to purchase property in the areas that ended up being above the Wilmington oil fields. So they were excluded from owning homes there, and therefore the homes that they did own included no mineral rights. So thousands of Long Beach families were getting this money just because they happened to purchase a home that sat above the Wilmington oil field. Not every person in Long Beach was getting a royalty, but many, many were. But even African Americans who could afford to buy a home in a certain area were not allowed to do so. They were excluded. Now, in 1994, when the 3 oil companies said, we're not going to pay these royalties anymore, at that time, the royalties averaged out to maybe $350 a year. Back in 1932 and leading up to before peak oil of Wilmington oil field, the royalties were a lot greater because there was a lot more oil being pumped. But imagine that even back then, it was just $350 a year. Imagine. So you're a vet coming home from World War II, and you get a wife, and you buy a home, and you're 22 and 24. You have a baby. You take that $350 a year and you put it in some investment. Your baby grows. Now your baby is 20 or 18. You now have the money to send your baby to college, which is the biggest predictor of economic come up for African Americans, how much education they have. That is what Black families could have done with that money had they been allowed to purchase homes in the areas from which they were excluded and gotten some of that oil royalty money. Again, those payments only stopped from those three big companies in 1994. So a lot of people will say, okay, Adriana, stop telling me about stuff in the 1900s. Nobody who's Black today, right now in Long Beach, was alive even back then. They were not hurt by those things. Those things are in the past. And what I'm telling you is that those things have carry through effects in the Black wealth that wasn't developed because of the exclusionary and anti-Black practices going on back then. In more ways than one, Black people were not allowed to develop wealth that they could have passed on to their kids because of the exclusionary practices that took place back then. So the past is not past, as a great writer once said, it is prologue.